So then, are your tools failing you? Let's hear from industry expert Adam Gray. He's the CTO of Novacoast. He will be exploring the critical cybersecurity challenges that modern organizations face and how advanced solutions can strengthen your defenses. Please welcome Adam Gray to the stage.
Hi, my name is Adam Gray. I'm the CTO for Novacoast, and over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to spend some time with you and talk specifically about what's been happening in the industry, why your tools are failing, what you should be doing about it. And I'm going to spend a decent amount of time on a little bit of history and a little bit of what I see in the market and where there are issues. And then we're going to jump right into kind of what you should be doing short-term and long-term, what that looks like for you. And we're going to go from there. So as an agenda today, we've already gone through some of the introductions. I'll do probably 30 seconds on company background and where I work. But I also want to talk about what some of the big data surprises have been over the last couple of years on data collection and things that we've been doing, what defense looks like, and then I'll kind of wrap it up with where you should be headed and where you should be going. So as I said, I'm Adam Gray. I spend most of my time in SOC operations and building out and working with large enterprises, mostly in the highly regulated space. And so I get to see a lot of different environments. I get to see a lot of different setups, what people find important, what they don't. And I think ultimately what I'm going to share today is around those findings. I work for a mid-sized organization. We are a few hundred technical people, work largely in the complex environments. And generally, we are seeing some of the more complex attacks, the uglier areas of infrastructure issues, et cetera. So with that, we're going to jump right in. Here's the first piece that's a problem for you. There are strong adversaries out there that you're going to deal with as an organization. You may not have dealt with them yet, or you may deal with them every day. The main issue that I want you to think about is your adversaries have enough funding and enough resources to do significant damage to your environment. In the last decade or so, the amount of hard losses and soft losses has gone up significantly. And I think that this is probably significantly underreported. Business email compromise at 1.8 billion in 2020, 29 million reported for ransomware. These have to be smaller numbers than are actually out there. So from a conservative estimate, every day, lots of infrastructure is compromised, and there are more than a couple thousand complaints per day that are filed in the US alone. Globally, that estimation is 1 trillion in total losses for downtime, theft, et cetera. And so when we think about what it's worth and how much money is being pulled from hard losses, and then how much is global loss from downtime and theft, et cetera, this market is a little bigger than the global market for drugs. So that puts us in fairly significant territory when we talk about organized crime or we talk about strong adversaries. So looking at your organizations and looking at what you're doing to protect those, we've got to put those in line with how we deal with that. So what have you been doing? Well, in the last 5 to 10 years, you've probably been spending a whole bunch of time on EPP. And if your endpoint protection programs and your endpoint protection capabilities were strong enough, I wouldn't be here. There would be no need for us to have this conversation. So if we think that EPP is all that it's cracked up to be, then it should be solving and stopping everything. And the reality is your prevention is just simply not working. No way it can, no way it will. And the failure rate is unacceptably high. And part of that is because of what's happened with EPP tools in general. There's been a shift to only collect certain kinds of data. There's been a shift to move towards behavioral models rather than what do I know globally about this specific file. And so the prevention models have been have been advertised to be this great capable option, but the reality is that your prevention models are failing, and they're failing every day, and they're failing in droves. And sometimes that's configuration of them, but by and large, it's simply that they're not prepared and they're not capable to provide prevention. So if we take a step back and we look at what should we be doing, and I look at the defense models that are out there, the defense pieces that we need to be taking a look at are really around what kind of data do we need to ingest. And over the past 5 years, I've worked for a SOC as a service platform that ingested terabytes of data, had rolling windows of petabytes of data, and had multiple years of compliance archival. And so when we looked at the data, we learned a few things. And the first thing we learned is that if we know that our EPP is failing, then we have to look at what should we be looking at, what kind of data should we be collecting in order to make good, competent decisions about the level of compromise or the capability of compromise or the risk of compromise in our environments. And so what those look like and what you should be pulling from every one of your devices should be all of the security logs. So security logs from your workstations, your servers, your mobile devices, your third-party security products, anything that pushes out syslog, all of those need to have security logs. You also, on all your file servers and workstations, need to have a complete file hash, a hash of every file on every file system. You need to pull all of the browser history from every machine that pulls that, mobile, workstation, servers, etc. You need to know all of your open ports and all of your connections. You need to have a complete app inventory. You need to have all of the extensions for every browser that is installed in every machine on every user in every part of your environment. And you need to know from an OS and app perspective what you're missing in patches, what is available, and those need to be updated and running in a much more cohesive manner. And then you need to have a list of every running process, and you need to know what those look like, and that includes things like PowerShell script files, other languages, etc. And so if you think about the data set that you need to pull, more than likely you only have a piece of that data set. More than likely you don't have enough of the data to make good decisions. And as we go through some of these pieces, what you're going to find, and when I look at these items, is this stuff's not trivial to collect, and I get that. But if you're not collecting it, your chances of compromise go up significantly along the way. And so the first one I'm going to start with is probably one that you don't have a lot of data on, but I'd like you to reconsider and re-look at, and those are browser plugins. So the group that I've worked with in the past and that we did a lot of this research around found multiple extensions that were malware hiding in plain sight inside organizations. And so one of the things to think about when you look at your environment is how do you collect your browser plugins, right? Do you have the capability to look at all of the permissions? So on the right, those are all the permissions a browser plugin might have. In the middle there, those are where it gets its updates from. And on the left is what that browser plugin's name is or what it's doing. And in general, the things that I would ask that you look at are permissions in your browser plugins that are egregious, meaning that does that plugin have the right to talk to any part of the internet with any protocol to send any kind of data? And can they read your history? And can they read your identity and your email and look at all your enterprise attributes, et cetera? And can it filter out and send data anywhere it wants, right? And so when I look at browser plugins as a whole, the first thing I want to know is what's the inventory for them? And then the second thing I want to know is where are they installed and what is the capabilities that they have? And then where do they get their updates from, right? Are they side-loaded plugins like this one that is all entirely shellcode? Probably something you'd want to go look at. So as you start to look at them, there are sets of permissions that go along with each of these, right? Whether it has the ability to send to anywhere on the internet, any protocols, things like all URLs or the star.star HTTP or HTTPS. Does it have the ability to make requests on your behalf? That's the web request. Or does it have the ability to block requests on your behalf? That would be the blocking capability. All of those are probably a little more permissions than you may want, right? You might not want a permission to say, read all my cookies, make requests on my behalf, block the things I look for, and then send my reports or my data anywhere on the internet. So these are all areas that when I look at an organization and I look for compromise, this is one of the many pieces of data set that you would need to make good decisions, and one that's probably worth looking at. The next that probably is difficult in your space would be things like PowerShell or what the extensions, how they get installed. This is an example of a PowerShell file that installed a browser extension via a malware campaign. And we took the PowerShell dropper and went and looked at a virus total, and you could see that nobody detected it as malware. Nobody looked at it and said this is problematic. But then when we cracked open the actual PowerShell, this is what it looked like, was a fully encoded file to create and install its own browser extension natively in your environment. And then we took the actual browser extension and compared that to the antivirus and EPP market, and still nobody saw this as problematic. And the PowerShell installer and functions invoked and operated, and off they go. And what this was a crypto stealing extension that masqueraded as a copy of Google's sheets and notes and slideshows. So the logo on it in the extension looked legitimate. The name of it looked legitimate, but its only purpose was to pick up and steal banking information and crypto wallets. So maybe not the best thing to have installed in an environment. When we switch gears and we look away from browser extensions and we look away from those pieces and move to more like your endpoint hashes, some of the data over the last few years as we've been working on has come up time and time again. And when I think about what this looks like is, in general, large percentages of the files that we capture are known and unknown, right? So 63% of the files, when we looked back, said, hey, these were known. Of the known ones, only 0.1% were known to be risky. And inside that 0.1%, we found some problems, right? So if I just took the known risky files of an environment and I then compared those to the EDR, EPP, AV, and said, what percentage of these known risky files can be found by each group? It was very problematic in that the very best performers were right sub 50% of what was known to be risky or known to be bad files that they could detect. And so what does that lead us to? If we know that your EPP is going to fail, and we know that you're probably not collecting enough data, there is a few things that probably need to change in your environment in order to be effective and in order to be capable in this space. One is basic hygiene. And when I say basic hygiene, what I mean by basic hygiene is that you have to have the capability to patch, and your patching is probably not happening. And there's no in between fully patched and not fully patched. And what I would tell you is that if you're running a patching program where you are not keeping up on OS and applications, then you're actively choosing to be owned, because there really isn't an in between. You can't really say, oh, the attackers aren't going to leverage this piece of infrastructure to take over my environment. And so when you move to application management and you move into the patching world, a few things have to come up. The first is application patching is not optional anymore. You have to keep all of your applications at the same version, right? You either are at the same version or n-1, meaning you're moving to a current version from one older version. If you go and look at your environment and you've got 7 different versions of Windows, 2010 or 2011, and you've got 9 different versions of Office and 4 different versions of Adobe tools, and 3 versions of another business application, your environment is ripe for compromise. One, consistency is probably the most important thing, and two, making sure that you are continually updated is critical. Now, if I also look back at that, if your application patching is not there and your OS patching is not there, the reasonable assumption is you're not collecting the right data, right? So I'm going to reiterate that another time, which is logs from all endpoints, hashes of file of all of the file system files. Any unknown file samples need to be looked at a sandbox. You have to know all your open ports. All your outbound and inbound connections need to be monitored and preferably checked against some threat intel. You need a full internet history in the cache. You need all the hashes, MD5 or SHA or something, of every running program in your environment so that you compare those to threat intel. You need a full application inventory, and you need to know all the browser plugins with all the extra data, right? So this is the right data at a minimum to have a fighting chance. Now, second to that is once you collect all the data, there's a really good chance that you don't have enough of the right type of people. So this is going to be a struggle and something that you have to decide. Do you outsource it? Do you insource it? Do you hire more people? Do you use more effective automation and tooling? But until you're collecting all of the right data and you have the capabilities to view it, um, you probably won't have an accurate count of how many people are the right type of people that you need. Like I said before, if we're depending on EPP, we're going to fail. We're just simply not going to be there. Those capabilities are not going to work for us. And everyone can say, oh, well, what about this EPP or what about that EPP? And the reality is that we've seen over the previous days, weeks, months, significant failures in our enterprise protection vendors. And I don't just mean operational failures or downtime or other things. I mean complete compromise of systems that go completely undetected for days, weeks, or months, right? The average is still a couple hundred days to detect that an environment's been compromised. And that is just simply unacceptable. And so if I look back at the prevention market and say, where are we headed? What are we doing? How do I collect this data? That prevention market is not really part of the solution. Too often we walk in and we talk about security programs, and people are very quick to say, this is my overall security program. And a huge chunk of that is a giant dependence on what EPP tool they have and why it's going to stop everything. And the reality is when I go back and I say sub 50% is our best capability, and likely I would say choose one that has good operational capabilities for you, and then on top of that add something like Microsoft. Right? That way you get a little bit better capabilities and they are compatible with each other. So if we think about our endpoint protection and we think about the data that we need to collect, and I think about why we're failing at this, it's pretty obvious. If I don't have my logs and my hashes and the browser history and all this other data, then doing threat hunting or running this against threat tooling or anything else is going to be sort of ineffective if I don't have these capabilities. The final piece is that I'd like to focus on outside of our dependence is that prevention is simply not working. I've yet to see an environment where some type of compromise has happened. That could be intellectual property theft, it could be data theft, but at the bigger picture, our hygiene capabilities don't get enough time and attention things like patch management, vulnerability management, those aren't getting the attention that we need, and too much is spent on prevention. And what I would ask the audience, and what I would ask anyone that I work with to do, is to spend significantly more time on hygiene, decent amount of time on detection, and spend a lot of time on response. Ultimately, detection and hygiene and response are significantly more important than anything else that we could be doing. All of the prevention that we have will not keep up with the hygiene, the detection, and the response capabilities. The last piece I will leave you with is back on the application and the patching side. Again, N-1 at a maximum level, right? So multiple versions of the same application in the same environment is too many. 2 should be the maximum. We shouldn't see 3. And 2 meaning that the one you used to be on and the one you're moving to. And that's a continual process of the one you used to be on and the one you're moving to. And if boxes fall out of compliance with that for X amount of time, and you can't resolve them for whatever reason, the OS won't update, there's some error, there's something broken, chances are that means it's a good time to rebuild that box and restart. And so ultimately, automation is going to be your friend. With that, I will say thank you, and I appreciate the time, appreciate the attention, and I hope this has been useful.